Hey everyone, welcome to Animals Voice Podcast. I'm joined with a special guest today, and it's on a really interesting topic, and it's something that comes up with our organization at the Ontario SPCA, now and again, and it's topical as well, even in the news, and it's all about folks that are homeless and that own pets, and sort of how they work through their challenges and their struggles dealing with homelessness and, of course, caring for their pets. So I'm joined by Todd Stosuy. He's the Field Services Manager at the Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter. Todd, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And I think I kind of want you to just start off by telling us a little bit about, your position being a field services manager and what that means.
Sure. So the County of Santa Cruz runs a shelter. We run two shelters, one in the city of Santa Cruz, one in the city of Watsonville. And we have the contract for the county and all of the cities. We, a few years ago, changed our name from Santa Cruz County Animal Services Authority to the Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter to try and be more community-based, more community-focused, less government. At that same time, we changed our officers' names from animal control officers to field services officers. Basically, those are the officers that go into the field, so to speak, the community, and engage the public. We felt that it was a friendlier way to approach the public than to call ourselves animal control. Yeah. So that's.
And I think your position is one where you're going into the community ultimately to help those in your community. And I think that's where what we're talking about really lies. It's all about sort of, assisting and helping and being a part of the community, not coming in as a sort of form of enforcement necessarily. Would you agree?
I agree. Yes. I mean, there's still times enforcement is necessary. There's, but I've always said that's about 5% of the time. There's 5% of the population that are doing egregious things to animals, and that's why the laws are on the book. But the majority of people out there want to do what's right for their animals. They just might not have the resources or the ability to do those things that we take for granted every day because we have those resources. And we discovered years ago at the Santa Cruz County Animal Shelter that really approaching people in the community, approaching people in the field, approaching people where they live is how you're going to solve a lot of problems, because those are the animals that are not coming into the shelter. Animal shelters that solely focus on what's coming into the shelter miss 90% of the population that's out there of animals that are not being called in about certain things or not coming into the shelter.
So today we're talking about folks in the communities who are homeless. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the first where we're going to start is about the obstacles that homeless people face, especially, when we're thinking about the fact that they need to care for their pets. So what are some of those obstacles?
Well, and I should preface this with, in Santa Cruz County, we have a very large homeless population, which is where I've been working there for 15 years, and so I've gained quite an insight into people experiencing homelessness. And it's really what you can imagine when you think about the culture of poverty and you think about people who are living day to day, struggling, trying to make ends meet on a daily basis, not knowing where they're going to sleep that night, not knowing what they're going to eat tomorrow. They really have a very limited day-to-day way to live where they're not thinking long-term. And that can really affect the animals that they have. What I've really noticed, again, about 95% of those folks experiencing homelessness that have animals love those animals, treat those animals better than a lot of people do who have houses. But the problem is the lack of resources, the lack of vaccinations, the lack of spay neuter, the lack of accessible food, the lack of routine vet care, the lack of toys, those sort of things. And even something as simple, I've seen homeless people begging on the side of the road with their animal, and people will give them a 20-pound bag of dog food with good intentions, but not realizing that 20-pound bag of dog food is very difficult for someone without a home to lug around with them for a couple weeks. So there's all sorts of issues that are out there that I think we that have houses, we that have jobs, we that live in mainstream society don't really notice. And when we go out there and we start working in communities, start working with the homeless population, we really see good humans. We see good people who, for whatever reason, have lost a home. We also see people with substance abuse issues. We also see people with mental illness, which takes their own challenges. And when you're going into homeless areas, homeless encampments, things like that, you need to take some of that into consideration. Still seeing that most of the people, even if they have substance abuse issues or mental illness, are, for the most part, very good dog owners or cat owners.
Yeah, and still love their pets.
Love their pets, yeah.
And so obviously the issues range quite significantly from, like you're saying, very basic things that, we maybe don't consider, some of us don't consider. You're used to having the toys and the bedding and the leash and the collars, multiple. A lot of people have multiple, of these things for their pets. But yeah, maybe just having those basic necessities, of course, up to some of the more extensive animal care and veterinary care and all of that.
And even with some of those minor things like leashes and collars, I can't count the number of people who've had them stolen from them, who are experiencing homelessness, who, I'll give them a leash, and then the next week I'll see the dog off leash, and it's like, well, either the city came in and removed my campsite and took all my personal belongings, or, another person came in and stole the leash, sort of thing. So it's things we don't think about that are happening out there.
I wouldn't have even considered, just even chatting with you now. That's incredible. So when we're talking about sort of starting to look at how we approach this, what are challenges that animal care staff or animal control officers, or in your case, field services officers, how do they start to build that trust with the homeless community and the homeless population? I can imagine that trust would be a big factor, a big obstacle.
Yes. The majority of people experiencing homelessness do not like law enforcement.
Right.
They see the badge and it's immediately a wall is up. People don't want to communicate with us. And I think that can go both ways. I think, I think we as officers have unfortunately through the years also kind of built that reputation on ourselves, for one way or another with different communities, different cultures, people in homelessness. So I think it's time now that we start bringing these barriers down. One really great way to break those walls down is to just treat people as humans. Be a human and go in there and talk to people. One of the things I always try and say is you need to listen more than you talk. When you go into a homeless encampment and you just start telling people what to do, they immediately shut off and you have no idea what it is that they need or they want. But if you go into encampments and you introduce yourself, and when I go into encampments, I don't wear my uniform anymore. I still do have some...
I was going to ask about that because you mentioned, the badge. They see the badge and a sort of wall goes up. So you go in, I guess, civilian clothes? I
go in civilian clothes. I still carry some of my defensive weapons in case I need them, because things can go squirrel at any time. So I have those with me still if I need them. But it's more of a soft approach going in, and I still stick out like a sore thumb going into a lot of encampments. I mean, in Santa Cruz, the homeless have a very particular look, and it's kind of that way in a lot of places. Yeah. And so when I go into the homeless encampments, it's obvious that I'm not living there. So even with that, people look at me like, who's this guy? But I've been doing this now in the homeless encampments for several years, and I'm pretty well known in the homeless community now. So even when I go in, even if I go in uniform, people know me, and they know that I'm there to work with them to build that bridge, and not there just to take their animals.
So speaking of bridging that gap, obviously this is something you've been at for quite some time. It's taken you a lot of time to develop that relationship. For any potential officers from other communities that might be tuning into this podcast, do you have any maybe kind of, I want to say quick tips, but I mean, I suppose they're not really quick in this line of work, but maybe that they can start to do to work towards bridging that gap of trust?
Yes. So most communities, you will know where the homeless encampments are. There's not just one person that's experiencing homelessness in one area. Homeless encampments, there's a large number of people living in those areas. And going to those encampments and introducing yourself and talking to people can be a really big way into it, with in mind knowing that you're not going to enforce laws. And one of the hardest parts that we had when we first started doing our foot patrols of the encampments was convincing the city police and the city rangers that we weren't going to be punitive. The first few times we went out there, we went with those law enforcement agencies just because we didn't know what we were going to come across. And having those officers there and saying, look, these people, we know they're illegally camping. We know we might come up and find drugs. We know we might come up and find these things, but we're not going to touch those. Not today. Can you please just come with us? We're going to deal with the animals. And they did, with some reservation, but they did. And so that was how we were able to really show them, look, we're wearing uniform just like the Rangers and the city police, but we're not here to mess with you. We're not here to...
That's awesome.
We're here to make sure your animals live a good life. And by bridging that gap and by really working with the community, I have so many what they typically call confidential informants that will now come to me and say, hey, and they call me Officer Todd. Officer Todd, we got some information for you. We got this, and it's minor stuff. It's not, like these big drug rings or anything. But hey, these people in this tent, over by Evergreen Street have a new litter of puppies, sort of thing. And so that way I'm able to go over there. And then when I talk to the people that litter puppies, they say, oh, you're Officer Todd. People told me about you. And
it works both ways, doesn't it?
It does
right?
work both ways.
So you're going to help them, and essentially on the other side of it, they'll trust you, and therefore they can help you.
Yes, exactly.
And give you information. Todd, this is fascinating. Thank you so much. We're going to take a really quick break, guys. Just check out these messages. We'll be right back with Todd for more of this story and information.
The Ontario SPCA is gearing up for their biggest fundraiser of the year, and we want you to join us. The 2018 Friends for Life Walk is Saturday, September 22nd and Sunday, September 23rd across the province of Ontario. Register today at friendsforlifewalk.ca.
Welcome back to Animals Voice Podcast. We are here with Todd. He's sharing some incredible information about folks who are homeless living with their pets, and how to sort of start approaching, helping them, approaching their situation, and helping officers and animal control officers like Todd bridge that gap to essentially help them. So we want to kind of continue hearing a little bit more, but more about your story. So I'm wondering, can you share any personal experiences where perhaps you've put some of these practices in? I know you mentioned before the break that you sort of started things out by taking some officers with you and just starting those introductions and sort of being honest, open, and friendly, and approaching people like people. Yeah. But do you have any other personal experiences?
Yeah, one of the so. When you work with people living on the street, a lot of times you have to understand street names, because a lot of people don't go by their names.
Okay.
So if I go into the street and I say, hey, where's John Smith? They're not going to know who John Smith is. But if I say, hey, where's Skunk Face? Then they know exactly who Skunk Face is, and they tell you. So that's why I was referring to myself as Officer Todd, because my street name in the homeless community is Officer Todd.
Okay.
So that's how they know me, and that's kind of how it gets passed around. But personal experiences, one woman that I often think about is her name is L.A. It's her street name. Her name is actually Linda, but she goes by L.A. And she was a woman who moved out to California from the Midwest. There's a lot of people that do come out to Santa Cruz because of the climate. We have a wonderful climate, and we have a lot of drugs. Right. Unfortunately, there's a lot of methamphetamine, there's a lot of heroin, there's a lot of marijuana. So a lot of people do come out. It's very socially acceptable. Police agencies don't focus a lot of resources into it, and so a lot of people know that they can come out and have that. So LA came out and did get addicted to methamphetamine pretty quickly and heroin, and she very quickly she moved out there with 2 dogs and a litter of puppies, and the mother dog ended up biting a city ranger. She was living in one of our city parks, so she ended up getting seized. The puppies all got seized as well. And because LA is homeless and doesn't have a lot of money, she couldn't afford the fees to get the animals out. I wanted to work with her and see if we could at least get her one puppy back. It was kind of difficult through the political process to give her the biting dog back. But unfortunately, I was not successful. So she was unable to get any of those animals back, with me knowing awful well she's going to get another dog somewhere somehow.
Right.
And that was kind of how I tried to sell it. Look, why don't we just give her one of these puppies, give it back to her spayed and neutered, vaccinated, and all that, and then we have to worry about her getting another one. But I was not successful in that, and lo and behold, about a year later, she had another dog. She had a pit bull puppy. And, as soon as I approached her and she saw me, and she has a very deep cigarette smoker voice, and, she's just like, Stosuy, you're not taking this one too. And I was like, no, you're right, LA, I'm not. I'm here to work with you. And I kind of talked to her about, what I tried to do with the puppy. And she was like, I don't believe you. I'm not so sure. Like, you're just going to take this puppy as well. But through talking to her for a good hour and a half, I mean, which is a long time.
Yeah.
Officers who have calls to respond to, an hour and a half is calls you should be getting to. But in my mind, I was like, this lady's already had these puppies.
Invest
She's
the
going to do
time.
it again. Exactly. So I was able to convince her to get the puppy spayed. And I took her right then and there to the shelter because I was afraid I was going to lose her if I didn't do it immediately. And so, we put the dog in the truck. She rode with me because she said, I don't trust you to not come back with the dog. So I'm coming to the shelter with you. I was, that's fine. So we went to the shelter, got the dog spayed, and then she got the dog back.
Wow.
And I see her to this day still living on the streets. But she looks good now. She's off meth. She's still smoking marijuana, but it's been done very well for her. She actually looks good. She looks healthy. She looks alive, and she can hold conversations. There was times where she couldn't even string 2 sentences together. So, and that's really the big thing as an animal care and control officer is we need to look at the people as well as the animals, because they're the ones that are with those animals, and we need to not have the judgment. We need to have the understanding. We need to have the empathy and compassion for the humans as well. And so that's, and with LA, I know she has told other people about me because I've had other people come up and say, hey, LA, told me about you. Can you help me with X, Y, Z? So it's
referrals.
Exactly. Great referrals.
Yeah. And you know what? There's, in my opinion, so much to be said for the fact that, as you mentioned, they love their pets just as much as anybody does, sometimes maybe even more so. And on the other side of that, pets are really good for us.
Exactly.
Pets are good for humans. So if we can help them and support their relationship with their pet, chances are it's only going to be positive for them.
Exactly.
And that, I feel like that's the case with LA. So it's kind of cool to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, and there's definitely a number of people I've run into that would be in jail long term if it weren't for their animal. Or one really nice kid who came here from the Midwest, who ended up he was very addicted to drugs and alcohol, but he was able to, because of his love for his dog and his fear that his dog was going to get taken away, was able to go back to the Midwest to be with his family and get in a recovery process.
Okay,
so,
there you go.
Yeah.
There's a stigma around homelessness,
Yes.
Around folks who either have been homeless for a long time, or it doesn't matter. The idea of it, there's that stigma. How can, not just animal control officers or someone working in the field, but really animal lovers, anybody who's listening, how can we start to sort of decrease that stigma around homelessness and, of course, pet owners that are homeless?
Well, we get a lot of calls into our dispatch line, where people say, hey, there's a homeless person panhandling at the intersection of 41st Avenue and SoCal, and they have a dog. And so our first question is, well, what's your concern? And they're always, well, they're homeless. Okay, well, how does the dog look? Well, the dog looks fine, but they're begging for food. Well, okay, they're begging for food for their animal. Does that show that they care for their animal? And so really turning it back on people and saying, look, what is the concern of homeless people having animals? And the homeless issue goes deep. It's in Santa Cruz, it goes very deep. There's a big divide with the homeless community there, for a lot of reasons. A lot of the garbage that's left in the parks, the needles that are showing up on the beaches now from the people who are addicted to drugs.
Yes.
So there's reasons why people in the community don't like the homeless. And I almost just said don't like the humans, which was almost a good Freudian slip. But there's also reasons why they need to realize that they are humans, and that while they might not like one or two things that they do, that they're good. They're humans as well, and that they love these animals, and that unless that animal is suffering, there's no reason to have a stigma around it. And I really do see that a lot of people in the homeless community will feed their animals before they feed themselves.
Yes.
They'll go. I actually saw somebody hand someone a cheeseburger once out their window, and the person put the cheeseburger right to the dog. So it's a hard stigma to break. I think just because it goes so deep, and every community is different. What's happening at Santa Cruz is very different from what's happening here. It's very different from what's happening in New York. Very different from what's happening in LA. So it's hard to really put one quick fix as to how to get that stigma away. But really, I think what it comes down to is seeing people as humans and really taking that compassion, that empathy, because people love dogs and cats. It's come a long way, but I think they need to kind of start thinking about the humans that are attached to them as well.
We're starting that conversation, like people like yourself who are ambassadors for these homeless people with pets that are able to chat with us here today, have all of our viewers and listeners tuning in to hear this kind of conversation. And that's what's going to start to break down those barriers. And we just have to keep being those types of ambassadors, and just keep, every time you're hanging out with friends or family and they go, oh, hey, look at that guy over there, whatever, with the pet, drop it. You know what I mean? Be the one in your family or the one in your group of friends that goes, what's the issue? And once we start doing that and just interjecting that into everyday life, we'll start to break that down.
I agree. Yeah. And that goes with everything, not just homelessness.
It's true.
It's true. All sorts of
Todd, it's been amazing.
Prejudices.
It's been so good you sharing this with us. Thank you very, very much for taking the time.
No problem. Thank you.
And we hope to continue your voice and your work and spreading this message. Everybody, this has been another great episode of Animals Voice Podcast. Again, Todd, thank you so much for sharing with us. Keep tuning into these stories, guys. We want to keep sharing this information, and we want to also hear from you. So if you've got something to say on this topic, reach out to us, okay? And you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You can reach out to us through any of our social media channels. But make sure you're also catching these podcasts on iTunes for another great episode. Thanks so much, Todd. Animals Voice Podcast.